Hello and welcome to Digital Health Off the Record, your podcast for the latest clinical technology, trends, news, and where we share unfiltered insights into a bunch of different topics when it comes to all things clinical technology. I'm Farrell from OptiTrial and my co-host.
Edwin from CM and today, Farrell, we're going to extend and combine two other topics that we briefly touched upon in our previous podcast, of which obviously one was AI, the uses of AI in clinical trials, and our last podcast was about the latest release of the ICH guidelines in the UK and Canada, and yeah, we decided to combine these two and to see how this becomes effective in real life. And the things that we want to cover here is to give a little bit of understanding of general use cases of AI in clinical trials, and then in specifically um, synthetic data usage, digital twins, agentic accountability, and yeah, I'm going to give a spoiler alert already, if you don't mind, but I think it's fair to say that the regulations do not cover anything that's has to do with AI. And obviously, the reason is regulations tend to be very slow. We discussed about the timelines for the latest update, but AI has been going extremely fast in the last couple of years, and actually every week I see new things coming by. So yeah. Um, so as we don't expect any iteration of the guidelines so far, we will discuss a little bit those examples. Also, what I wanted to mention is even though there's an Annex 2 coming up for the ICH, we know that AI will not be mentioned or specifically covered in that guidance, as it will focus on decentralized elements. Uh, but some of the regulations will cover AI, which is obviously the FDA has some good guidance written down. And in August 26th, the EU AI Act is coming. So we're going to combine these a little bit. So Farrell, let me start with you and can you give a little bit of an insight and define what's the first important things you want to comment on?
And as you touched upon, AI, it's not really covered by any much clinical trial regulations yet. Wasn't part really of ICH 6 R3. So at the moment, the focus is not necessarily knowing exactly what to work around, but also trying to see how to fit your implementation of AI within the boundaries of these regulations. So it's more not explicit in how do you tackle things, but how do you use those as your kind of guide rails on this is how we should be putting things together. But there has been, of course, the EU AI Act that has come out, which does it covers all industries, so it's not very specific to one or the other, but it gives some categorizations of, how how critical your use case is. And one of the areas that it does kind of call out more specifically is when you have AI being used for anything relating to like patient safety or any clinical decision making, which that's where it's making the decisions by itself, not necessarily having the support of the investigator in, changing doses or registering any safety events, etc. So in those cases, they're treated as high risk, which obviously from a risk-based approach means that you have to do a lot more, focus a lot more on your validation side of things. But at the same time, a lot of those use cases would also probably put you into the software as medical device area. So you're definitely going to have to do a lot more validation in those cases, anyhow. And then the other side of any use of AI algorithms within medical devices. So when you do have your medical device, then it's going to have to meet kind of two different types of regulations because it'll have to be compliant with all the medical device legislations and as well have the kind of AI governance piece built in as well. So then that becomes quite a challenge, especially if the algorithm itself has a machine learning element to it, because then you'll have to continuously need to validate whenever that algorithm changes. And from a clinical trial perspective, when you're going to have quite differences in fluctuation between, the results that you get from your first patient in to the last patient, when it comes to what that algorithm tells you, it's quite difficult for the purpose of a clinical trial where you're trying to prove a specific set of protocol requirements.
Yeah, good example. But this is pretty complex and sort of as you said, the high risk. Any areas that are a little bit less risky?
Yeah, and I think that's kind of where, you hear and see a lot of the use cases already, especially, with all the vendors that are all doing AI. Pretty much a lot of it is down to any of your internal, like, operational work, so things that would be deemed not clinical. So, any workflow efficiencies, having it as a tool where it's within your own, you are the master and controlling it. So, to automate drafting protocols, things like that, that you're still having to review and do everything else. It's just kind of taking away some of the key parts. And that's where sometimes as well, since it's nice and ambiguous, there is that gray area between, what is your business operations and what's your clinical use cases too. But, you have to work sensibly and focus on, does this directly touch site and patient decision making per se, and then kind of take it from there at the moment until something more concrete does come out.
Yeah.
Then some of the other areas that things are growing at the moment is kind of on the agentic AI side of things, which maybe that's one of the considerations when you do have some of these operational efficiencies and you're using agents. It can get a bit more murky on the gray side when it comes to that, especially where you have to try and fit your AI agents within the realms of GCP, which has very clear oversight and accountability. And when you have an agent who's being autonomous, then that becomes a bit of a challenging point, right?
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And I think in the normal ways of working and looking at sort of the procedures, it's the findings are always about, okay, who was responsible, who was accountable for these kind of things. So that becomes even more prominent with bringing in these agentic workflows. So that the current RACI, as people and companies most have these, need to be clearly updated and maybe restarted again, start from scratch. That would be my recommendation actually. Start from scratch, have that embedded and clearly define that. You definitely need to keep a human oversight and clearly have that final accountability, especially in cases when, and I really see the advantage of these agentic workflows, so like SAE reporting, protocol deviations. SAEs like, okay, are the events that are being reported, should they be classified as serious or not? Because then you need to think about sort of the timing of reporting, escalating this to SUSARs and so forth. This is where you need to clearly define where do you put the human into the loop and where's your safeguard here. Also protocol deviations. I've seen examples where sort of when it's identified and classified as a protocol deviation, it's automatically captured and filed. But how about the trends that you see and the actions that you need to do to ensure that those protocol deviations do not happen anymore? When does that come into place? Because if you need to keep oversight, you cannot just have it automatically documented and filed without people being made aware of these kind of things. So I think that's something for companies to consider. Any other challenges?
Yeah, I think you just kind of touched upon one of them. So in that example, what happens if the agent completely misses something that should be reported? So And that's kind of where you need to have that clear ownership and accountability, because if somebody doesn't own the agent, then who's responsible for the misses as well? Which means you probably need to have some other tools that can enable whoever is owning that kind of side of it to be able to catch or probe to see whether there's anything that should have been caught, which is always one of the challenges. But at the same time, it's, humans have misses when it comes to these things too. So are we going to hold that to a higher account than, you know, any human that might miss something as well? So it's still that kind of balancing act, I would say, but knowing who owns it and who should be responsible for double checking, because if you are saying the agent is driving a benefit, you need to have to put that in place, which is probably taking it off the shoulders of somebody who has been doing it previously.
Yeah.
Then I think the other kind of areas where there's some good benefits is if you've implemented a proper RBQM type framework or monitoring tools in place that can drive automating reviewing any of the critical to quality type data on an ongoing basis to avoid, the challenges when it comes to humans reviewing big data sets, and as well also having it being able to do that in like real time. So it's more of a continuous cycle of checking rather than something that's done on a periodic basis as well.
Yeah. I think we've seen a lot of the new vendors also popping up, offering, uh, in this case, standalone RBQM solutions. I don't know whether that's going to be the final and the holy grail, but but especially adding that overlay for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Um, so I think, yeah, basically the other big challenge that probably sits with the agentic area is it's still going to be, say, balanced when it comes to adoption, just because it's not totally clear when it comes to regulations. So it's that typical thing of innovation first, regulation follows,
Yeah.
which probably means there's going to be some more regulatory documents that pop up every now and again. And speaking of the kind of areas of AI that probably could do with a bit more guidance and regulation, one of those areas is around synthetic data, which in itself, it's when in the drug development life cycle where you aim to utilize some, let's call it created data from an algorithm, which utilizing things like real world data or looking at the current data to try and predict what the kind of gaps that might be. So if for example you have a patient that drops off at a certain point in time based on the data that they've captured up front, trying to predict what might come after for the subsequent visits, or if you have a fuller data set with a few spotty areas, what might be the likely case when it comes to those gaps based on the kind of previous and the subsequents as well.
Yeah.
So,
So
mhm.
you would say, would you then say this, the synthetic data component is the like a container sort of definition of the usage and across the entire value chain of doing clinical trials? So from start to end and everything that's using sort of existing data, simulated data
Mhm.
is considered to be part of the synthetic data usage.
Exactly, and it's similar to the,
Yeah.
let's say, synthetic data is a kind of bigger universe, similar to when you have AI, which encompasses Gen AI, Agentic AI, and so on.
Yeah.
So synthetic data is the kind of big bucket where there's
Yeah.
some other more specific use cases, which, yeah, which ones
Yeah.
come to mind?
Well, for me, like software validation testing is something, our training the internal machine learning models. So
Mhm.
not the commercially available ones, but the ones that are specifically built by the companies itself. And digital twins is I think, a really tangible example. I think we will go through this in more detail later on. But the use case, as an example, I think you probably touched upon this already, is about simulations and protocol testing. So you can simulate how the protocol will run. And it helps to complement true data that's been acquired. It helps you to predict the number of protocol deviations. It can help predict the number of dropouts. And this is a huge advantage because the sooner you know all of this, the sooner you can correct course. And this should definitely lead in reducing the number of dropouts, for example, which is a cost saver. Reducing the number of protocol deviations it's not so much a nice to have, but the implications of how much time and effort it takes to follow up on these things is enormous. And it could potentially then also reduce the number of events that occur due to the protocol deviations. It's also
Absolutely.
useful for
Yeah.
modeling based on real world data, for sure.
Yeah, which I think that's a really good example of it where, you run your simulations on your protocol and you can do some A/B type testing to see, which of these variants probably is it's going to be the best for, overall delivery and study success.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm expecting that this will be highly and frequently used within the industry for sure. Some others, yeah, maybe advantages. So yeah, it enables trials in populations where randomization is ethically difficult. So rare diseases, pediatric studies, and also oncology studies where people are in their final stages of their life. The more historical and simulated data you can use, the better. Um, yeah, and it helps reduce patient burden and trial costs, as we said. So eventually, we hope it can reduce the control arms, but I think we will touch upon that later. Um, Anything it shouldn't be doing?
I mean, it definitely shouldn't be used as an excuse to, let's say, repair your weak trial conduct. You still need to run your trial totally above board and to the highest quality. You can't just say, don't worry, we can get some synthetic data and it'll cover it afterwards. Um, so it shouldn't be a shortcut around trying to have that high quality patient data. So it's meant to be a supplement, not a kind of, a first pass, let's say. So and as you mentioned, a lot of the examples when it comes to how to best use it can be with, enabling better planning, having smarter use of your real world data so that you can really justify sort of where your trial decisions have been made and maximizing your probabilities of success. And it's very briefly touched upon it earlier. So do you want to maybe go into a bit more detail on the digital twin or the synthetic control arm side of things?
Yeah, let's go into the digital twins and sort of let me try to explain at least where the difference or where the nuance sits compared to the overall synthetic data. As we said, the synthetic data is the container grip and covers everything. The digital twins is is maybe sort of using models for individual patients and to map out trial populations, but it's built on real data. And I think that's an important thing. And it can be run forward in time to simulate responses, progression, treatment effects without conducting the trial itself. Utilizes real world data to show the current standard of care results and how those results look like. Um, do you have specific use cases on the digital twins,
Yeah,
particularly?
I think it's used a lot in the kind of discovery and design type phases where, you are, let's say, putting different molecules or, binds of the same molecule up against each other, try and, run that kind of
Mhm.
prediction of, what one will work the best before you even get. So when you're working in your preclinical side of things, um, I think one of the more interesting sort of future use cases that keep popping up as well is, could it replace, having control arms in your study? Which, if it can massively reduce your costs because, you can utilize any of the other publicly available clinical trial data or share a control arm across things that are in a similar TA, because, there is such, in some therapy areas, there's such a high saturation of the number of trials, and every trial having a control arm as well. And the amount of real world data that there should be as well, it should be possible. And I think I've seen some research that showed that there have been a few studies that have started that journey to try and help, let's say, minimize the number of patients that are part of their control arm, which using some digital twins and synthetic data as part of that. And yeah, the cost savings that I saw were massive, because this was within an oncology trial where, the patients, it's about, 150K per patient. So they were making a saving of, 10 to $20 million for a large phase 3 oncology trial.
Yeah.
So it can have a massive benefit. And then, the other side of it, with all the struggles when it comes to patient recruitment, the less patients that are going into the control arm maximizes the number that are going into the active agent. And, that can help boost your patient recruitment numbers to, see how the drug it works in human.
Yeah, I think this is a really good, probably even motivator for patients to to participate. And we know that sort of having a chance of getting placebo is one of the reasons for patients not to participate. And yeah, the less we have those cases, the better we will be able to run those studies. Yeah, completely agree.
Exactly. I mean, yeah, when you put it like that, one of the, let's say, the ethical benefits when it comes to doing this,
Yeah,
it's like you said, the patients are signing up for the trial. They're hoping to be on the active agent as part of the trial, and that's why they're going
yeah,
through all the consents, and that's what they're aiming to do.
yeah.
Um,
Can
yeah,
I
that's sure.
mention a couple of sort of challenges that come with
Yeah,
it? Because
go
I'm
for it.
all in for this, because and I will keep it brief, but I'm supportive of this. We should be doing this all, but the challenges is that it is as good as the outcome is as good as the data that is being used to get to this. So rubbish in is rubbish out. The data that goes in is equal to the output. So the model can be really good, but we always need to be conscious and refreshing the data sets for sure. And I've learned that statistics are really great, but they never apply to me. Meaning, what I'm trying to say is that patients and people always do and behave a little bit differently than predicted. And so it's never going to be the holy grail for future. And you always need to correct course during study or before, during, and after, and correct this and those kind of things. So the model drift that it can bring is something definitely for people to consider, and not to fully rely on the output. And I see sort of a similar trend with using sort of ChatGPT and so forth. Everyone blindly almost trusts the output that's being generated, purely because of the first hits are great, and then
Hmm.
you don't challenge it anymore. So in these particular cases, I see sort of the same thing coming through.
Absolutely,
Um,
and that's where you really need to keep your AI data governance and structures, and have your full audit trail and sources and explainability of, how did the model come up with that
yeah,
data as well, just to
yeah,
be very much on the safe side, which is time back. It's kind of, how do you comply with the existing regulations today, right?
yeah, yeah. Good. So, Farrell, I think we covered again in this time just the high level things. We covered the agentic pieces of AI to be used as internal workflows mostly, because this is the quickest and safest way to utilize AI in clinical trials without putting too much things at risk. And I hope we were able to explain well enough the difference between or the use cases of synthetic data and differentiate the digital twins as part of the synthetic data. Eager to understand from other people how they're going to use these kind of things, but I'm at least confident that this will be utilized a lot. How do you want to close for next time as well?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a very exciting area. And then next time, we're going to jump into another exciting but a lot more well-established area. So we're going to take a dive into eCOA, which is very close to my heart. And we're going to be looking through some of the key benefits when it comes to utilizing eCOA, taking a look at some of the other considerations. So things like translation and licensing, when to use provision device versus bring your own device, some of the other key benefits that come with utilizing eCOA over paper, like digital accessibility support, and yeah, just taking a look at things to look out for when you're going through your implementation.
Looking forward to it.
Yes. So let's wrap up there. And yeah, if you have any questions or any comments, drop them, send us a DM. And yeah, don't forget to follow us and yeah, keep in touch.
Yes. Speak to you next time, Farrell, and thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Bye
Bye.
bye.